Howdy, Immortallium here, and I thought a good way to start off the horror channel is to show off my horror DVD and Blu-ray collection. Just to let you guys know, which horror movies I've seen, etc, etc. Of course, this isn't all of the horror films I've ever seen. I've of course seen some in cinema, I've seen some on streaming services such as Shudder, I've gotten rid of some DVDs and Blu-rays, but in general I think it is fair to say that these films make up the majority of the horror that I've seen, simply because I'm very much a physical media collector. I like to collect, physical media such as books, such as DVDs and Blu-rays, etc, etc. So without any further ado, let's take a look at my horror DVD and Blu-ray collection. So those of you who are familiar with me via my anime and manga channel will be a little bit familiar with this room. This is where I keep all of my DVDs and Blu-rays. So specifically for my horror, it's contained over here. So I do believe it starts around here. With, of course, The Exorcist, a nice little classic, followed by Rosemary's Baby, and Mother is definitely quite similar in many ways to Rosemary's Baby, so I kind of paired them a little bit together. We've got Cloverfield, American Psycho, Last House on the Left, another very good classic, Black Christmas. This is kind of my slasher section in many ways. So we got Black Christmas, we got Alice Sweet Alice, The Burning, Maniac Cop, the Scream movies. Looking forward to seeing the new one. I haven't actually seen that yet. Halloween, which I'll come back to in a moment, discussing Halloween. Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. You'll notice that I have the first, third, fourth, and the seventh Nightmare on Elm Street film, and that's because I used to collect horror films kind of one by one. If I heard good things about it, I'd pick it up. But recently, I've become more interested in seeing entire franchises, the good and the bad. So I am kind of thinking of picking up all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies at some point. But for the moment, this is my collection of Nightmare on Elm Street films, of course, including Freddy vs. Jason, Chucky, which I actually only watched the Child's Play films recently, and I really enjoyed that franchise. So I'm very glad to have watched it, and I'm looking forward to watching the TV series as well. After that, we've got My Bloody Valentine and the remake. I think the original My Bloody Valentine is way better than the remake. I think the remake is actually really, really bad. It's such an unpleasant time watching it. Sorry, of course, if you guys like it. It's just, that's my own personal taste. We've got The Shining, Dead Calm, Trick or Treat, which is fantastic, definitely highly recommended. 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, The Thing, The Girl with All the Gifts, which is great, definitely recommended. Videodrome, The Fly, the Basket Case trilogy, which quite enjoyable trilogy, even if it is a bit all over the place. Reanimator, From Beyond, Housebound. We got Carrie, Misery, Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs. Then we got the Dead movies, so Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, Survival of the Dead, and the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead remake. After that, we got Train to Busan, which is absolutely fantastic. If you're into zombie films, Train to Busan is absolutely great. I definitely recommend it. Then we got The Fog, Wreck, Jaws, Piranha. We got What Lies Beneath, which it's a bit debatable to me whether it's a horror film, but I kind of lump it in. Cabin Fever. Then we got Hostel, Hostel Part 2, and Hatchet. I know it's a bit of an odd little box set, but, what can you do? Then we got Let the Right One In, Let Me In. Then we're looking at some of these kind of earlier classic. Well, this isn't a classic right here, although I do like it quite a bit. Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Reaper of the Genetic Opera, which is the one I was talking about, Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, then Ring, The Ring, Audition, The Sixth Sense, It Follows, Get Out, Us, The Blair Witch Project, and then I recently actually got as many of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies that I could. Texas Chainsaw Massacre holds a very special place in my heart. Recently, I've been in the mood to pick up an entire franchise and watch all of them. Prior to picking them up recently, I think the only ones I had was the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the remake. But I'm glad to have watched them, and I'll definitely consider talking about them in the future. After that, we have The Hills Have Eyes, the remakes, which... The reason that I have the remakes in the first place, because I asked someone to get me The Hills Have Eyes and they got me the remakes by accident, even though I specifically told them to get me the one from 1977. So what can you do? The Strangers, the two films, You're Next, Ready or Not, Tremors, again, Saw. I just recently picked up a bunch of these Saw films, and I'm quite an avid Saw fan. I know some of the films are quite dodgy in quality, but there's just something about the Saw movies that really appeals to me. So I quite enjoy them. Then we have the first 2 Paranormal Activity films, Creep, the 3 Evil Dead movies, the original Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness. Then we got Cabin in the Woods, which actually Cabin in the Woods was the film that really got me back into horror back in 2020. I'd seen it in cinema, but I watched it, I fell in love with it, I loved all the horror references. I was like, I really should watch more horror films, and that's when I began to significantly expand my collection. After that, we got the Banana Splits movie, which always surprises people when I tell them it's a horror film, but if you've seen it, you will know why. A Quiet Place, The Loved Ones, which I really like The Loved Ones, and Don't Breathe. These are 2 fantastic movies. I guess A Quiet Place is also really good, so I definitely recommend them. We got The Wicker Man, I Saw the Devil, which, again, adore this movie. The Wailing, It Comes at Night. Then we got the Firefly trilogy of House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and 3 from Hell. Just to let you guys know, The Devil's Rejects is one of my favorite films of all time. I think it's an amazing film. A lot of people find it quite rough, and that's fair enough, but I absolutely love it. These 2 movies I don't love quite as much, but I can discuss them in the future. Sweeney Todd, From Dusk Till Dawn, Drag Me to Hell, Battle Royale, Candyman, Fright Night, The Omen, Don't Look Now, Phantasm, Possession, which Possession's a weird one, Poltergeist, Sinister. Then we got the first 2 Conjuring movies, as well as the 3 Annabelle films. I'm just not particularly enthused about completing it like some of the other franchises, you know, picking up some of the worst films such as The Nun. Anyway, we got Wolf Creek, The Babadook, Sleepy Hollow, Hereditary and Midsommar, which is this one as well. Great movies. The Witch, Dark Touch. This one, very hard to see, but it's The Company of Wolves. Dog Soldiers, The Descent, which The Descent, amazing. Highly recommended. Kill List, Chronos, The Devil's Backbone, What Have They Done to Your Daughters, Suspiria, Cannibal Holocaust. This is the British release of Cannibal Holocaust. And I guess I better just explain very quickly that this version is technically censored. I think there's like about 7 or so seconds that have been censored in it, but I really don't mind it simply because the real footage that they had for that particular sequence involved an animal being tortured on camera, and you can still hear it, so I don't really mind that they cut away, put in some nature stuff. But if you're bothered by censorship, then maybe you don't want to pick this up. But for me, I wasn't too bothered by it. We got Eyes Without a Face. Then we get into the new French extremity films, which I'm really liking. A lot of these new French extremity movies, not all of them equally, of course, but absolutely my favorite, Don Mapo. Excellent film. I really like it. Then we got The Ordeal, Satan, which I believe is Shaitan in French, Frontiers, and Martyrs, which of course Martyrs is probably the most famous of all the new French extremity movies. Raw. And we got Revenge, which Revenge is a bit of a funny one for me in that it feels like, to me at least, a new French extremity movie that's been saved through a Hollywood system. It's still, you know, very disturbing in the same way that a lot of these new French extremity movies are. But I also feel like it's a bit tamer, still quite enjoyable. Then we got Hellraiser, which, again, Hellraiser is another franchise I just don't know about completing. I love the first 2 Hellraiser movies, absolutely adore them. But the 3rd movie, which is contained in this box set, really was not a fan of. Even though, like, I love Deep Space Nine, and Terry Farrell's the lead, so you'd think I would love it. But just for whatever reason, it just didn't do it for me. And then finally, for the last horror film over here, we've got Lord of Illusions, which is directed by Clive Barker. I believe it's only one of 3 films that he directed. He also directed the first Hellraiser film. I haven't picked up, I believe it's called Nightbreed, but I do have it on my wish list, so I do want to pick that up at some point because I think Clive Barker is a genius. I absolutely love his works. So those are all the horror films that I've watched that are in my collection, but I also want to bring attention to some other horror related things. So in terms of TV content that I've seen that I would consider to be, you know, horror series, now it's debatable whether The Twilight Zone and Night Gallery are horror. I personally wouldn't really consider them to be, but I've heard some people refer to them as horror, so I may as well include them. But of course we've got Hammer House of Horror, which, you know, is a bit of a rough series, but there are some great episodes in it. After that, we've got Tales from the Dark Side. Again, has a lot of ups and downs, but as a horror fan, very enjoyable series. And then, of course, American Horror Story. Some of the seasons are better than others, but there's some great stuff in American Horror Story, and I'd love to pick up more of it. It's just, it seems like for some reason they're not releasing it on home media anymore. If you guys know anything about that, let me know. I'd absolutely love to hear about that. And then, I don't know, for some reason I always kind of disassociate Walking Dead and Buffy and Angel from horror stuff, even though I guess they technically be horror, but to me they kind kind of feel like, you know, other things. Like this feels more of a drama. These are more like action comedy kind of stuff. I don't know, but I may as well throw them in just because, you know, some people might consider them to be horror. And then we got the films that I haven't watched yet. Now there's quite a variety of content over here, but I do want to draw attention to some of the horror films I haven't seen. So for instance, going back to Clive Barker, we've got The Midnight Meat Train, which the story in the Books of Blood is amazing. A highly recommended short story, and so I'm hoping that once I watch the film that it's the same level of quality. It probably won't be, but you know, I really like it to be. Then we got American Mary. After that we got Krampus, we got A Quiet Place. I'll ignore some of the other content such as the anime and stuff. So then we got Harpoon, we've got Climax, which I'm really looking forward to Climax. And then we got Society, we got Deep Red, Dark Water. Then let me just move this giant pile. I'll get back to this pile in a moment. We've got Resident Evil, which again I consider the Resident Evil movies to be more action than anything else. So they actually haven't included the Resident Evils in that horror collection. Same way that I don't really consider Shaun of the Dead to be a horror film. You know, it's a horror comedy, I guess, but it's far more comedy than horror, I think. So anyway, so that's something else I left out. But getting back to this pile then, we got Jeepers Creepers. We've got these Halloween movies, which, again, as I said before, talking about Halloween, I really wanted to actually watch the rest of the Halloween franchise. So I ended up picking up a bunch of the movies. Unfortunately, Rob Zombie's Halloween is quite expensive, so I'm waiting for the price to drop, particularly since I have heard that a lot of people don't particularly like that film. Now, of course, I'll be very interested as a fan of Devil's Rejects to see it, but I do admit that a lot of Rob Zombie's other works are quite rough, so I don't know about that. We, of course, have Stephen King's It down here, which this is the mini-series. I do want to read the book before watching it, which also applies actually to the two recent It movies as well. After that, we got A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. We've got Jacob's Ladder, Nina Forever, skip some of the animation and the Star Wars and all that. We got Night of the Wolf, Mandy, Legend of Hell House, The Endless, Sleep Tight, Brotherhood of the Wolf. That might be more action, but I've heard people talk about it in context of horror. The Howling. And I believe that might be it in terms of horror films. So I hope that you guys enjoyed seeing my horror DVD and Blu-ray collection. Of course, I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts on my DVDs and Blu-rays. What do you think of it? Do you think that there are any horror films in particular that I'm missing? And if so, of course, tell me about them. Of course, if they're missing, there's probably a reason for that. It might be a case that they're not available or something, but I'd still absolutely love to hear it. What are your thoughts on collecting horror DVDs and Blu-rays? Do you guys also collect it, or do you primarily watch stuff streaming-wise as well? I'd love to hear some discussion with regards to consumption of media, physical versus digital. And of course, if you have any other information about horror movies, about my collection, etc., please leave them in the comments below. And of course, if you want to support the channel, I have my Amazon affiliate links in the description below. When you purchase a horror movie or horror book or whatever through those affiliate links, not only supporting me, not only supporting the channel, but you're also supporting the horror industries. So I would definitely encourage you to purchase your horror through those affiliate links. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.